Asterisk, a struggling janitor, ridiculed by his own family, inherits a crumbling castle. They laughed until a $300 million secret was uncovered. This is the unbelievable story of resilience, betrayal, and a treasure hidden for centuries. Asterisk, before we dive into this incredible journey, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us that life's greatest treasures often come the most unexpected ways. The unexpected inheritance. The rain hammered against the windows of a small, dimly lit apartment in Chicago, the sound almost drowning out the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. Ethan Carter wiped his calloused hands on his worn-out janitor's uniform, sighing as he dropped into a creaky kitchen chair. Another long shift at the office building downtown. Another night of aching muscles and the quiet loneliness that had become his constant companion. He glanced at the clock. 11:37 p.m. Too late to call anyone. Not that he had many people to call. His family? They hadn't bothered with him in years. Not since he'd chosen a simple life over the cutthroat corporate world they thrived in. To them, he was a failure, the black sheep who'd rather mop floors than chase dollar signs. Ethan reached for the stack of mail on the counter, flipping through bills and advertisements without much interest. Then his fingers paused on an envelope, thick, cream-colored, with an embossed return address he didn't recognize. Blackthorne and Associates, Edinburgh, Scotland. Frowning, he tore it open. The letter inside was formal, the kind of crisp, expensive paper his siblings would appreciate. Dear Mr. Carter, it is our duty to inform you that the late Alistair Blackthorne, your great-uncle, has named you the sole inheritor of Blackthorne Castle and its estate in the Scottish Highlands. Ethan's breath caught. His great-uncle? He barely remembered the man, just vague childhood stories about a reclusive relative who'd left America decades ago. And now a castle? He laughed out loud, the sound hollow in the empty apartment. This had to be a joke. Or a scam. Or maybe he was just so exhausted he was hallucinating. But the letter had a phone number. Before he could second-guess himself, he dialed. A crisp British voice answered on the third ring. Blackthorne and Associates. How may I assist you? Ethan hesitated. Yeah. I got this letter about inheriting a castle. This is Ethan Carter. Ah, Mr. Carter. The voice warmed instantly. We've been trying to reach you. Yes, the inheritance is quite real. Your great-uncle's was very specific. The property goes to you, unconditionally. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. But why me? The lawyer chuckled. Mr. Blackthorne was a man of peculiar tastes. He believed in legacy, not lineage. He admired your humility. Ethan almost snorted. Humility? Right. Or maybe his uncle had just pitied him. Still, he couldn't shake the wild, impossible hope rising in his chest. A castle, a fresh start, a chance to prove, to himself, to his family, that he was more than they'd ever believed. The next morning, he called his older brother, Richard. Hey, it's me. So, funny story. I just inherited a castle in Scotland. Silence. Then, Richard's booming laugh. Oh, that's rich. What's next? You're the lost king of England. Ethan clenched his jaw. I'm serious. There's a lawyer, paperwork. Ethan, come on. You clean toilets for a living. No one's handing you a castle. Richard's tone dripped with condescension. If this is some sad attempt to get Mom and Dad's attention, just stop. The call ended with a click. Ethan stared at his phone, frustration burning in his throat. Fine. Let them laugh. He'd go see this place for himself. 2 weeks later, he stood at the base of a winding, overgrown path in the Scottish Highlands, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The lawyer's directions had led him here, to what was supposed to be Blackthorne Castle. All he saw was ruins, crumbling stone walls, half-collapsed towers, ivy strangling the remains of what might have once been a grand entrance. The place looked like something out of a horror movie. Ethan's heart sank. Of course it was a wreck. Why had he expected anything else? A gust of wind howled through the broken arches, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. And then, from behind him, a voice, rough, thick with a Scottish brogue. Ye must be the American. Ethan turned. An old man in a weathered trench coat, stood there, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. His eyes, sharp and assessing, studied Ethan like he was a puzzle to be solved. "Fergus McAllister," the man said. "Groundskeeper. Or what's left of one." Ethan swallowed. "Ethan Carter. I guess this is mine now." Fergus snorted. "Aye, and good luck with that." He turned, gesturing for Ethan to follow. "Come on, then. I'll show you what's left of your inheritance." As Ethan stepped through the broken gates of Blackthorn Castle, he had no idea that beneath his feet, hidden for centuries, lay a secret worth more than money, a secret worth killing for. The mockery begins. Ethan followed Fergus to the overgrown courtyard, his boots crunching on broken stone and dead leaves. The air smelled of damp moss and something older, something that reminded him of the antique shops his mother used to drag him to as a child, full of forgotten things gathering dust. The old groundskeeper moved with surprising ease for a man his age, his walking stick tapping against the uneven cobblestones. "Been tending this place near 30 years, Fergus said, his voice rough. "Not that there's much left to tend." Ethan's eyes wandered over the collapsed archways, the shattered stained-glass windows, the ivy-choked towers. "How long has it been like this?" Fergus let out a dry chuckle. "Oh, it's been found apart since long before my time. The last Blackthorn who cared died a century ago. The rest just let it rot." Ethan frowned. "And my uncle?" "Alistair." Fergus's steps slowed. "Aye, Alistair. Odd man. Lived here alone, mostly. Didn't care for folk much. But he had his reasons." He shot Ethan a sideways glance. "You don't know much about your own family, do ye?" Ethan's grip tightened on his duffel bag. "Not this side of it, no." Fergus hummed but said nothing else, leading him toward what remained of the castle's main hall. The massive oak doors hung crooked on their hinges, one nearly off entirely. Inside, the ceiling yawned open in places, patches of gray sky visible through the gaps. The floor was littered with debris, broken furniture, chunks of plaster, animal droppings. And yet, Ethan's breath caught. Despite the decay, the grandeur was still there. The soaring stone arches, the intricate carvings along the walls, the massive fireplace big enough to stand in. This had once been a place of power, a place of wealth. Now it was his. Fergus watched him, arms crossed. "So, what do you plan to do with it?" Ethan didn't have an answer. He'd been so focused on just getting here, he hadn't thought beyond that. "I don't know. Fix it up, I guess." Fergus barked a laugh. "With what money, lad? This isn't some wee cottage. Restoring Blackthorn would take a fortune. And that's assuming you even want to." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. The old man was right. What was he thinking? He was a janitor from Chicago with barely enough savings to cover his flight home. This wasn't a gift. It was a burden. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his sister, Victoria. "So, is your castle everything you dreamed?" Attached was a photo of her and Richard at some upscale restaurant. Glasses of champagne raised and a mocking toast. Ethan shoved the phone back in his pocket, jaw clenched. Fergus eyed him. "Trouble." "Family," Ethan muttered. "Ah." Fergus nodded like that explained everything. "Well, come on. Might as well show ye where you'll be sleeping. It's the only room with a roof still on it." He led Ethan up a narrow, winding staircase, the steps uneven, the stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. At the top was a heavy wooden door, surprisingly intact. Fergus pushed it open with a creak. Inside was a small but sturdy bedroom. A four-poster bed, its curtains moth-eaten but still hanging. A dusty desk, a cracked mirror, and, most importantly, no holes in the ceiling. "It's not terrible," Ethan admitted. Fergus smirked. "High praise." He tossed a set of old iron keys onto the bed. "Castle's yours, for better or worse." Ethan picked up the keys, the metal cold in his palm. "You're not staying?" "Ach, no. I've a cottage in the village, but I'll be by tomorrow. Someone's got to make sure you don't fall through the floorboards." With that, Fergus turned and left, his footsteps fading down the stairs. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He pulled out his phone again, staring at Victoria's text. Without thinking, he typed back, "It's perfect." Then he turned the phone off and lay back, staring at the canopy above him. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins, carrying whispers of past. And beneath the castle, something long buried waited, the ruins of Blackthorn. The first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the heavy drapes, painting stripes of pale gold across the dusty floorboards. Ethan groaned as he rolled over, his back protesting from the unforgiving mattress. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the musty scent of old stone and damp brought it all rushing back. Right. Castle. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. The room looked even smaller in the daylight, the walls pressing in like they were trying to decide whether to embrace him or crush him. Outside, birds chirped, their songs echoing strangely through the hollow ruins. Ethan reached for his phone, dead, of course. No outlets in a medieval bedroom. A sharp knock at the door made him jump. "You alive in there?" Fergus's gruff voice carried through the wood. "Yeah." Ethan called back, his voice rough with sleep. The door creaked open, and Fergus stepped in, carrying a steaming mug and a brown paper bag. "Brought ye breakfast. Figured ye wouldn't have much." Ethan took the mug, strong black coffee, and the bag, which held a warm meat pastry. "Thanks," he said, genuinely touched. Fergus grunted, leaning against the doorframe. "So, you still planning on staying?" Ethan took a sip of the coffee, wincing at the bitterness. "I don't know. I mean, what am I supposed to do here?" "Up to ye," Fergus said with a shrug. "But if ye're staying, ye should see the rest of it. Know what you're dealing with." Ethan nodded, though the idea of exploring the crumbling ruins didn't exactly fill him with excitement. Still, he finished the pastry, which was delicious to his surprise, and pulled on his jacket. Fergus led him back down the stairs and into the main hall, where daylight streamed to the broken ceiling, illuminating the devastation in stark detail. "It wasn't always like this," Fergus said, running a hand along the cracked stone wall. Back in its prime, Blackthorn was one of the grandest castles in the Highlands. Feasts, tournaments, nobles from all over Europe. Ethan tried to picture it. The hall filled with laughter and music, the tables laden with food, the fire roaring in the massive hearth. But the image wouldn't stick. All he saw was decay. "What happened?" Fergus's expression darkened. "Time, neglect, and some say the curse." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Curse? Aye, the Blackthorn curse." Fergus lowered his voice, though there was no one around to hear. "Legend says a family angered a witch centuries ago. She swore their line would end in ruin, their wealth swallowed by the earth." Ethan almost laughed. "You believe that?" Fergus gave him a long look. "I've lived here 30 years, lad. I've seen things." Ethan shook his head. "Right. Well, I don't believe in curses." Fergus smirked. "We'll see." They continued the tour. The kitchen's a collapsed mess. The chapel, surprisingly intact, if covered in bird droppings. And the library, which made Ethan's heart ache. Shelves upon shelves of ancient books, most ruined by moisture and time. Then Fergus led him down a narrow corridor, stopping at a heavy wooden door barred by a rusted iron lock. "And this," Fergus said, producing a key from his pocket, "is the one place Alistair kept sealed." The lock groaned in protest as Fergus turned the key, but it gave way. The door creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Ethan peered down, his stomach tightening. "Where does it go?" Fergus handed him a flashlight. Only one way to find out. The air grew colder as they descended, the stone steps slick with moisture. The beam of Ethan's flashlight flickered over the walls, revealing strange carvings. Symbols he didn't recognize, worn smooth by time. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a circular chamber, and in the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, its surface covered in dust. But what caught Ethan's eye was what lay on top of it. A book, not just any book. This one was bound in cracked leather, its pages yellow with age. Ethan stepped closer, his pulse quickening. Fergus stayed back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alistair spent hours down here. Never told me why." Ethan reached out, brushing the dust from the cover. The title, embossed in faded gold, sent a chill down his spine. The Secrets of Blackthorn. He opened it. The first page held a single sentence, written in elegant, looping script. Beneath the ruins lies the truth. Ethan's hands trembled. Fergus exhaled sharply. Well, that's not ominous at all. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming. The family's betrayal. Ethan's fingers traced the brittle pages of the ancient book as rain began pelting the castle's remaining roof tiles above them. The musty scent of decaying parchment filled the underground chamber, mixing with the damp earth smell rising to the stone floor. Beneath the ruins lies the truth, Ethan murmured, flipping carefully to the next page. His pulse quickened as he found a detailed sketch of the castle's foundations, with strange markings indicating hidden passages. Fergus shifted uncomfortably beside him. We should go back up. Storms make these old stones. A thunderous crash from above cut him off. Both men froze as the sound of splintering wood and crumbling mortar echoed through the chamber. Ethan was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time with Fergus close behind. They emerged into chaos. The library's back wall had partially collapsed, sending centuries-old books tumbling into a heap of rubble and rainwater. Bloody hell. Fergus gasped, surveying the damage. That's been coming for years. Ethan barely heard him. His attention was fixed on a glint of metal among the debris. Brushing aside broken plaster, he uncovered an ornate brass key nearly the length of his hand. Fergus sucked in a sharp breath. That's the master key. Opens every lock in Blackthorn. His eyes darted at Ethan. Alistair kept that on him at all times. How'd it end up? A pounding at the castle's main entrance interrupted him. The heavy oak doors shuddered under the assault. Ethan exchanged a glance with Fergus before moving toward the sound, the massive key cold and heavy in his grip. The pounding continued, now accompanied by a familiar voice shouting over the storm. Ethan, open this damn door. Victoria. Ethan's stomach twisted as he lifted the iron bar. The door swung inward to reveal his sister, perfectly cold despite the downpour, flanked by 2 men in suits. Behind them, Richard stood under a black umbrella, his expression unreadable. Victoria's designer boots clicked against the stone floor as she swept in, her sharp gaze taking the destruction with visible disgust. Christ, it's worse than I imagined. What are you doing here? Ethan demanded, fingers tightening around the key. Richard stepped forward, rainwater dripping from his umbrella. We came to save you from yourself, little brother. You can't possibly think you can handle this situation. One of the suits produced a document. Mr. Carter, we represent the Blackthorn State Preservation Society. Given the historical significance. Bullshit, Ethan snapped. You're trying to take it from me. Victoria sighed dramatically. Don't be dramatic. We're offering to buy you out. A fair price for this crumbling money pit. Fergus made a low noise in his throat. Ethan glanced at the old groundskeeper, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Richard pulled out his phone. Look at the numbers, Ethan. Even if you had the funds to restore this place, which you don't, it would take decades. We're offering you a way out. Lightning flashed, illuminating the ancient tapestries hanging in tatters along the walls. In that moment, Ethan saw not ruins, but what could be, what should be. No deal, he said quietly. Victoria's polished smile vanished. What? I said no. Ethan squared his shoulders. This is mine. I'm keeping it. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Mr. Carter, you should understand that there are legal avenues. Get out. Ethan's voice echoed through the great hall. All of you, get out of my home. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Richard chuckled darkly. Fine, play Lord of the Manor, but when you come crawling back, I won't. As his family retreated into the storm, Fergus moved to Ethan's side. That went well. Ethan exhaled sharply, looking down at the key in his hand. They'll be back. Aye, Fergus agreed, with more lawyers next time. Rain dripped through the damaged ceiling, striking the stone floor like tiny drum beats. Somewhere in the castle's depths, a door creaked on ancient hinges. Ethan turned toward the sound. First things first. Let's see what this key unlocks. The storm raged on as they descended back into the darkness, the castle's secrets waiting beneath their feet. The hidden chamber. The brass key burned in Ethan's palm as he and Fergus descended back into the underground chamber. The storm's fury was muted here, reduced to a distant rumble through layers of stone. The single bulb Fergus had rigged years ago cast long shadows across the walls, making the strange carving seem to shift and twist. Ethan approached the stone pedestal where they'd found the book. Now he noticed what he'd missed before, a small, perfectly circular indentation in its side. He pressed the key against it, a perfect fit. With a grinding click that echoed through the chamber, a section of the wall slid back, revealing a narrow passageway. Dank air rushed out, carrying a scent of wet earth and something metallic. Fergus grabbed Ethan's arm. "Wait." The old man's face had gone pale. "That shouldn't be here." "What do you mean?" "I've studied every blueprint of Blackthorn. There's no record of this." Fergus's grip tightened. Alistair must have built it. Ethan shone his flashlight into the darkness. The beam revealed rough-hewn steps descending further into the earth. Only one way to find out. The passage was so narrow their shoulders brushed both sides. The air grew thicker with each step, until Ethan felt like he was swimming through it. After what felt like an eternity of descent, the tunnel opened into a cavernous space. Ethan's breath caught. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of the great hall above them. But unlike the ruins upstairs, this space was pristine. Ancient torches and iron sconces lined the walls, though none were lit. The floor was paved with intricate mosaics depicting scenes of medieval life. And at the center stood a sight that made Ethan's knees weak. A treasure hoard. Gold coins spilled from ornate chests. Jeweled goblets gleamed in the flashlight's beam. Suits of armor stood sentinel around perimeter, their polished surfaces reflecting the light like mirrors. Fergus made a strangled noise. "Dear God!" Ethan stepped forward in a daze, his boot knocking against something metallic. He bent to pick it up. A gold coin, heavier than it looked, stamped with a crest he didn't recognize. "This isn't just treasure," Fergus whispered. "This is history." Ethan turned the coin over. On the reverse side was an inscription in Latin, Subrinis Veritas. Beneath the ruins, the truth. A sudden draft extinguished their flashlight. In the absolute darkness, a new sound reached them, the unmistakable creak of armor moving. Fergus's voice was barely audible. "Ethan, did you—" Metal clanged against stone. Then again, closer. Something was in the chamber with them. Ethan fumbled with the flashlight, his sweating fingers slipping on the switch. When it finally flared back to life, the beam revealed one of the suits of armor now standing directly in their path, its empty visor staring at them. The coin fell from Ethan's numb fingers, ringing against the stone floor. As the sound faded, a voice echoed through the chamber, a deep, rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The blood of Blackthorn returns." The remaining torches burst to life with blue flames, illuminating the full scope of the treasure, and the dozen armored figures now turning toward them in unison. Fergus grabbed Ethan's arm. "Run." They barely made it back to the passageway before the first sword struck stone where Ethan's head had been. The armored figures moved with unnatural speed, their metal boots clanging against the mosaic floor. Ethan slammed the hidden door shut behind them, but the sound of metal on metal continued from the other side. Whatever those things were, they were trying to get out. Back in the main chamber, Fergus collapsed against the wall, gasping. "We need to seal this. Now." Ethan's hands shook as he turned the key, locking whatever was down their back in its tomb. The moment the mechanism clicked, the noises stopped. Silence. Fergus wiped sweat from his brow. "Tell me you still think curses aren't real." Ethan looked down at his empty hands. He'd left the coin behind. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A single gold coin, identical to the one he dropped, now sitting innocently on the stone pedestal. He pocketed it without a word. Above them, the storm raged on. But now Ethan understood the real storm wasn't outside. It was beneath their feet, waiting to be unleashed. And his family would be back at dawn. The vulture's circle. Dawn painted the ruined castle in pale gold as Ethan sat slumped at the great hall's massive fireplace, the mysterious gold coin turning over and over in his fingers. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those empty visors staring at him, heard that rasping voice whispering through the dark. Fergus snored softly in a nearby chair, an empty whiskey bottle dangling from his fingers. The old groundskeeper had insisted they drink after last night's horrors, and Ethan hadn't argued. Now his head throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The coin caught the morning light, its strange markings seeming to shift under his gaze. Sub Irenis Veritas. The same words from the book. The same words etched into the castle's crest above the fireplace. A sharp knock at the door shattered the silence. Fergus jerked awake, the bottle clattering to the stone floor. Bloody hell. Ethan stood, his muscles screaming in protest. He knew who it was before he even lifted the door's iron bar. Victoria stood framed in the doorway, her designer sunglasses glinting in the morning sun. Behind her, 3 black SUVs idled in the courtyard, their windows tinted dark. "You look terrible," she said, stepping inside without invitation. Her nose wrinkled at the sight of the whiskey bottle. "Celebrating already?" Richard entered behind her, followed by a small army of men in suits, lawyers. Ethan assumed until he noticed equipment cases they carried. Surveying tools. Ground-penetrating radar. Ethan's blood ran cold. Fergus moved to his side, his voice low. "They know." Victoria smiled, all sharp edges and gleaming teeth. "We had the most fascinating call last night from a historian at Edinburgh University. Apparently, Blackthorn Castle has been hiding quite the secret." Richard stepped forward, his expensive shoes crunching on broken plaster. "We're willing to increase our offer, Ethan. Sign over property today, and you'll walk away with enough to buy a nice little flat somewhere. Maybe even get a real job." Ethan's fingers closed around the coin. "Get out." Victoria sighed dramatically. "Don't be tedious. That treasure belongs in a museum, or better yet to the family." She reached into her bag and produced a document. "Just sign." The air in the great hall grew heavy, pressing against Ethan's skin like an approaching storm. Somewhere deep in the castle's bones, Stone groaned. Fergus grabbed Ethan's arm. "Don't." Ethan met his sister's gaze. "I said get out." Victoria's smile vanished. She nodded to one of the men, who stepped forward with a court order. "I'm afraid that's not an option. The Historical Preservation Board has granted us access to—" A deafening crack cut her off as a massive chandelier above them shattered, raining crystal shards onto the stone floor. The ground trembled, sending clouds of dust cascading from the ceiling. One of the lawyers yelped, scrambling back toward the door. "Earthquake!" But Ethan knew better. The castle was waking up. Fergus's fingers dug into his arm. "The coin!" he hissed. "Give it to me." Ethan handed it over without question. The old man examined it quickly, then flipped it to reveal the inscription. His eyes widened. "It's not Latin," he breathed. "It's Gaelic, a binding spell." Another tremor shook the castle, stronger this time. A section of the far wall collapsed inward, sending Victoria and her entourage scrambling for cover. Richard's face had gone pale. "What the hell is happening?" Ethan didn't answer. His attention was fixed on the fireplace, where the blackthorn crest now glowed with an eerie blue light. The same light they'd seen in the chamber below. Fergus pressed the coin back into Ethan's hand. "It's responding to you. Only a blackthorn can control it." Victoria stared at them like they'd gone mad. "Have you lost your minds? We need to evacuate." The ground heaved violently, sending everyone stumbling. From somewhere beneath their feet came the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against stone. The armored figures were moving. Ethan looked down at the coin in his palm, then at his terrified family. In that moment, he understood the truth. The treasure wasn't gold or jewels. It was power, and it was his. As the walls trembled around them, Ethan made his choice. He stepped forward and pressed the coin against the glowing crest. The castle fell still. Silence. Victoria's breath came in ragged gasps. What did you just do?" Ethan turned to face his family, the coin warm in his hand. "I think it's time you left." Outside, the morning sun shone bright and clear. But in the depths of Blackthorn Castle, something ancient had stirred, and it remembered the curse of Blackthorn. The moment Ethan's family fled to the castle gates, the air itself seemed to sigh in relief. The unnatural tremors ceased. The blue glow faded from the crest above the fireplace. An eerie calm settled over Blackthorn Castle. Fergus collapsed into a chair, his hands shaking. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Ethan stared at the coin in his palm, its surface now warm to the touch. What just happened? You woke it up, Fergus said hoarsely. The castle, the land, whatever power has been sleeping here all these centuries. He nodded to the coin. And that's the key. Ethan turned the artifact over, watching light play across its ancient markings. The inscription Subarinis Veritas seemed to pulse faintly. You said it was a binding spell. Aye, but not just any spell. Fergus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Legend says the first Blackthorn made a pact, wealth and power in exchange for eternal guardianship. The treasure isn't yours to take. You're here to protect it. A gust of wind howled to the broken windows, carried with a faint scent of burning herbs. Ethan's skin prickled. From what? Before Fergus could answer, tires crunched on gravel outside. Both men tense. But it wasn't Ethan's family returning. A vintage Land Rover pulled into the courtyard, its dark green paint streaked with mud. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, tall, with a wild mane of auburn hair barely contained in a braid, wearing sturdy boots and a wax jacket. Fergus relaxed slightly. Dr. Shaw. The woman strode into the great hall without hesitation, her sharp gaze taking the damage from the tremors. Fergus. I came as soon as I heard. Her eyes landed on Ethan. You must be the American. Ethan bristled at the label but said nothing as she approached, hand extended. Dr. Eleanor Shaw, she said. Historian and, when necessary, paranormal consultant for the Scottish Heritage Society. Ethan shook her hand cautiously. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused. Not just an academic. Then, Ethan Carter. And I don't believe in ghosts. Eleanor's lips quirked. Neither do I. But curses? Those are another matter. She reached into her satchel and produced a leather-bound journal. Your uncle's notes. He spent decades researching Blackthorn's history. Ethan took the journal, flipping through pages filled with Alistair's cramped handwriting, sketches of artifacts, maps of underground tunnels. And on the last page, a single sentence circled in red. The treasure must never be moved. Fergus made a low noise in his throat. Alistair knew. Eleanor nodded grimly. He wasn't just hiding the treasure from thieves. He was keeping it from... She hesitated, searching for the right word. The armored figures. Ethan finished. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. You've seen them. Last night, in the chamber below. A shadow passed over Eleanor's face. Then we have less time than I thought. She moved to the fireplace, running her fingers over the Blackthorn crest. The legend says the guardians sleep until the treasure is threatened. Your family's arrival, their plans to excavate. It woke them up, Ethan realized. Eleanor nodded. And now they'll keep waking, unless we reinforce the binding. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky outside remained clear. Fergus crossed himself. Ethan looked down at the coin, then at the ruins of his inheritance. How? Eleanor opened her mouth to answer, but a sound cut her off, a deep metallic clang from somewhere beneath their feet. Then another, and another, rhythmic, relentless, marching. Fergus's face went ashen. They're coming! The temperature in the great hall plummeted. Frost spiderwebbed across the windows. Somewhere in the castle's depths, a door creaked open on rusted hinges. Eleanor grabbed Ethan's arm. The coin, it responds to your bloodline. You need to... A deafening crash cut her off as a suit of armor displayed in the hallway lurched forward, its empty visor turning toward them. Not a replica. A real guardian, somehow surfaced from below. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. The coin in his hand burned like ice. The armored figure raised its sword and charged. The ultimate sacrifice. The armored figure moved with unnatural speed, its great sword slicing through the air where Ethan's head had been a heartbeat before. He stumbled back, the coin clutched so tightly in his fist its edges bit into his palm. "Ethan!" Eleanor shouted, grabbing a rusted fire poker from the hearth. She swung with surprising force, striking the guardian's helmet with a resounding clang. The creature staggered but didn't fall, its empty visor turning toward her with eerie precision. Fergus grabbed Ethan's arm, dragging him behind an overturned table. "The coin, lad. Use the damn coin." Ethan stared at the artifact, his mind racing. "How?" Another deafening crash echoed through the hall as a second armored figure emerged from the corridor, then a third. Their metal boots struck the stone floor in perfect unison, advancing like a medieval battalion. Eleanor backed toward them, her poker raised offensively. "Blood," she gasped. Ancient magic always requires blood. The first guardian swung its sword, cleaving the table in two with a single blow. Splinters rained down around them as Fergus cried out, a jagged piece of wood embedded in his thigh. Something inside Ethan snapped. He dragged the coin's edge across his palm, hissing as blood welled from the cut. The moment his blood touched the metal, the coin glowed white-hot, searing his skin. The guardians froze. A deafening silence fell over the great hall. Then, one by one, the armored figures dropped to their knees, their swords clattering against the stone. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he watched the impossible scene unfold. The coin's glow spread through his veins like liquid fire, illuminating the blue tracery of his blood vessels up his arm. Eleanor's eyes widened. The pact, it's renewing. Fergus groaned, clutching his bleeding leg. "Aye, but at what cost?" The castle itself seemed to answer. The walls trembled, dust cascading from the ceiling as deep below. Stone ground against stone. The very foundation shifted as something ancient and powerful awakened fully for the first time in centuries. Ethan's vision swam. The coin's power burned through him, forging connection to every stone, every hidden passage, every secret of Blackthorn. Knowledge flooded his mind. The castle's true history, the treasure's purpose, the reason it could never be moved. He saw it all in a dizzying rush. The guardians weren't protectors of the treasure. They were prisoners, and the treasure was their cage. Eleanor grabbed his shoulders as his knees buckled. "Ethan, stay with us." But the pull was too strong. The coin's magic dragged him down into the castle's bones, into the dark where something waited. A voice, ancient and terrible, whispered through his mind. "At last, a true Blackthorn returns." With a gasp, Ethan wrenched himself back to the present. The coin's glow faded, leaving his palm unmarked. No cut, no scar. But the connection remained, humming in his blood like a second heartbeat. The armored figures still knelt, motionless as statues. Fergus stared at him with new understanding. "You've bound yourself to it now. To the castle. To the curse." Ethan met his gaze, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. "I know." Outside, thunder rumbled, not from the sky, but from the earth itself. Somewhere in the village, church bells began to ring of their own accord. Dogs howled. Eleanor helped Fergus to his feet, her face grim. "It's begun. The awakening." Ethan turned toward the corridor leading underground, toward the chamber and what lay beneath it. The coin's power pulsed in time with his heartbeat, calling him downward. His family thought they wanted the treasure. They had no idea what they were truly playing with. And now neither did he. The truth revealed. The castle groaned like a living thing as Ethan descended into the depths, the coin's pulse guiding him like a compass needle pointing true north. Behind him, Eleanor half-carried Fergus, their labored breaths echoing to the narrow passageway. The air grew thicker with each step, tasting of damp earth and something older, something metallic and sharp, like a storm about to break. The chamber door stood open, though Ethan swore he'd locked it. Inside, the torches burned with that same eerie blue flame, casting shifting shadows across the mosaic floor. The armored figures remained where they'd fallen, kneeling in perfect rows like soldiers awaiting orders. But the treasure, Ethan's breath caught. The gold and jewels lay exactly as before, yet somehow more, brighter, sharper, as if seen through newly cleansed eyes. The coins gleamed with impossible luster, the gemstones pulsed with inner fire, and the ancient weapons hummed with restrained power. Fergus sagged against the wall, his face pale from blood loss. God preserve us. Eleanor stepped forward, her academic curiosity overcoming fear. It's not just treasure, she murmured, running reverent fingers over an ornate chest. Every piece is a prison. Ethan moved to the central pedestal where they'd first found the book. Now he saw what he'd missed before, delicate silver chains binding each artifact to the stone, nearly invisible against the gray surface. And beneath the pedestal, carved into the floor in letters 3 feet high, what is taken must be returned. A shudder ran through the castle. Dust rained from the ceiling as the ground trembled. Eleanor grabbed Ethan's arm. The Guardians aren't protecting the treasure from thieves. The treasure is the Guardians. She pointed to the nearest suit of armor. Look closely. Ethan moved closer, his pulse hammering. Now he saw it. Faint etchings covering the armor's surface, mirroring the patterns on the coins and jewels. Not decorations. Names. Hundreds of them. Every Blackthorn who ever lived, Eleanor whispered. Their souls bound to protect the castle. The realization hit Ethan like a physical blow. The curse isn't about losing wealth, it's becoming part of it. Fergus made a strangled noise. Alistair? Eleanor nodded grimly, pointing to a relatively new-looking gold ring among the hoard. Sure enough, Alistair Blackthorn was etched into its surface in tiny, precise letters. Ethan's stomach turned. His uncle hadn't abandoned the castle. He'd joined its defenses. The coin in Ethan's hand flared white-hot again, searing his palm. At the same moment, the closest suit of armor twitched, its visored head snapping up to stare directly at him. A hollow voice echoed through the chamber, speaking from a dozen metal mouths at once. The pact must be honored. Ethan stumbled back as the armored figures began rising in unison, their movements jerky but determined. The treasure glowed brighter, the chains rattling against the stone as if straining to break free. Eleanor grabbed Fergus, dragging him toward the exit. Ethan, we have to go. But Ethan stood frozen, the coin's power coursing through him like electricity. He suddenly understood, really understood, what the castle wanted, what it had always wanted. A true Blackthorn to take up the mantle, to become its heart, to stay. The lead guardian advanced, raising its sword not in threat, but in offering. The blade shimmered, transforming before their eyes into a golden scepter, the final piece of the treasure, the final prison. Ethan knew with terrible certainty that if he took it, he'd never leave Blackthorn again. Somewhere above them, a familiar voice shouted his name. Victoria. She'd come back, and she brought an army, a new legacy. The sound of Victoria's voice shattered the eerie stillness of the chamber like a stone through glass. Ethan's head snapped toward the entrance as booted footsteps pounded down the corridor. Too many to count. The Guardians turned in unison, their hollow gazes fixed on the doorway, weapons at the ready. Eleanor grabbed Ethan's arm. We have seconds before this becomes a bloodbath. Fergus, pale but determined, limped to the pedestal. The scepter, it's the key. Take it up, and the castle will obey your command. Ethan stared at the golden rod in the Guardian's outstretched hand. To accept it meant binding himself to Blackthorn forever, but to refuse... The first of Victoria's mercenaries burst into the chamber, rifles raised. They froze at the sight of the armored figures, their professional composure cracking. Victoria pushed through, her eyes wild. Ethan, what the hell is... Her words died as she took in the treasure. Not just gold and jewels, but power. Raw, ancient, and terrifying. Richard appeared behind her, his face slack with greed. My God! The lead guardian's voice boomed through the chamber. The pact must be honored. Chaos erupted. A mercenary fired. The bullet ricocheted off a guardian's breastplate in a shower of sparks. Like a well-oiled machine, the armored figures moved to defend the treasure, their swords flashing. Ethan acted on instinct. He grabbed the scepter. White fire exploded through his veins. The castle's memories flooded him. Centuries of Blackthorns who'd come before, each adding their strength to the foundation. He saw wars fought in shadow, treasures hidden from greedy kings, secrets buried so deep even history forgot them. And he saw the truth. Blackthorn Castle wasn't just stone and mortar. It was alive. and it had chosen him. The battle froze mid-swing as Ethan's will radiated outward. The Guardians stepped back. The mercenaries lowered their weapons. Even Victoria stood transfixed, her face a mask of shock. Ethan spoke, and the castle spoke with him. Enough? The single word vibrated through the chamber with physical force. The remaining torches flared bright gold, illuminating the awe on every face. Richard was the first to break. Were you? Ethan turned the scepter in his hands, feeling its weight, not just of gold, but of generations. The keeper of Blackthorn. Victoria's greed gave way to something like fear. Ethan, we didn't know. But you would have taken it anyway, Ethan said softly, just like you've taken everything else. The castle rumbled in agreement. Dust sifted from the ceiling as hidden mechanisms groaned to life. Stone scraped against stone as a new passage opened, one leading not deeper into the earth, but up toward daylight. Eleanor understood first. It's showing you the way out. Fergus nodded grimly. All of you, while you still can. The mercenaries needed no further encouragement. They fled, their boots slapping against stone. Richard hesitated, torn between greed and survival, until Victoria grabbed his arm and dragged him after them. Only when their footsteps faded did Ethan allow himself to sag against the pedestal. The scepter's glow dimmed, its power settling into his bones like a comfortable weight. Eleanor studied him with new respect. What now? Ethan looked around the chamber, at the treasure, the guardians, the history etched into every stone. Now we restore Blackthorn to what it was meant to be. Fergus chuckled weakly. That'll take a miracle. Ethan smiled, feeling the castle's pulse sync with his own. We've got a few of those lying around. 1 year later, the grand reopening of Blackthorn Castle drew crowds from across Scotland. Tourists marveled at the meticulously restored halls, the museum-quality displays, the legends brought to life. No one noticed the subtle glow of certain artifacts, or how the armored figures in the great hall seemed to shift positions when no one was looking. Ethan stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, watching children chase each other across the same stones where his ancestors had walked. The scepter, now displayed in a secure case, hummed quietly in the back of his mind. Eleanor joined him, her hair wind-tossed from a highland breeze. It's everything you promised. Fergus, walking without a limp thanks to the castle's strange healing, raised a glass of whiskey. To the new Blackthorn legacy. Ethan clinked his glass against theirs, his gaze drifting to the secret passage only he could see. Somewhere below, the Guardians stood watch. The treasure remained protected. The pact endured. And for the first time in centuries, the castle was at peace. Did this story of hidden treasures and family secrets captivate you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're craving more tales of ordinary people discovering extraordinary legacies, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Who knows what secrets the next story might reveal?